Remind all panelists that this Zoomers to Boomers Roundtable, the goal of it is to encourage and help facilitate open conversation. So do not feel like your opinion is invalid and do not feel like you can't say certain things. As well as if you are offending someone or if you think a statement might be hurtful, it is best to keep it to yourself. But if anything, always reach out to me or Nadia and we can always help you out with that. I would also say that we have limited time. So please try not to monopolize all the time and try to engage with others and share ideas and exchange ideas with others. And those are the rules I would say for that I emphasize the most for Z2B. Nadia, do you have anything to say?
I mean, Omar pretty much said everything. But yes, just please, be respectful and open-minded, stay calm and don't interrupt others because, even if someone's sharing and it's really long, just let them finish sharing and then step in. We would like to hear everyone's ideas equally, so just please, chime in and obviously say your opinion based on what everyone else said. Also, keep your webcam on and background noise to a minimum if possible. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, so to start off the roundtable, just wanted to ask everybody, what is your worst food pet peeve? Meaning like anything related to food. So it could be restaurants, it could be the way someone eats, it could be like the food itself. What is your worst pet peeve for food? And I would say for me, like in the past, I was a bit of a spoiled brat. I really never really liked eating leftovers, so all the food had to be fresh for me. So I never ate any leftovers growing up. That was my worst pet peeve. But thankfully, I grew out of it. Eddie, if you want to go next.
Interestingly, I used to hate when my food would touch each other. And these days, I'm known to just kind of like throw everything in a bowl and mix it all together. So I evolved just like you did, Omar.
And if you could call on somebody else as well.
Let's go with Aditi.
Yeah, mine has to be pineapple on pizza. I can't stand that. Controversial opinion, I know, but I can't stand that. I'll call on Shubangi.
I think Aditi just started a little bit of a war because I love pineapple on pizza. But my biggest pet peeve is probably like people who double dip or just a general like a dip for everybody. It just, the idea of that disgusts me. So just like everyone needs their own individual little dishes of dip. So that's my biggest pet peeve. Michelle.
This is so fun. The word slather should not exist on food. I cannot stand the word slather. So, yeah, that's my biggest one. And pineapple belongs on pizza. Sorry, let's hear from Kimmy.
Aditi was the person that was about to start our first roundtable conversation with pineapple on pizza. Personally, I order it like on top, but then I like actually pick off the pieces of pineapple and then have them afterwards to almost give like the juice on top of the pizza. I don't know. That's probably weird. But I think my biggest food pet peeve is when people like have really annoyingly long like Starbucks orders or coffee like orders. I'm a barista, so I'm sure this also dips into like a personal level type thing. But yeah, when people order that much, it's like, why do you need that much things in like one drinks? Yeah. And I think I will call on Brooke.
Hey, so my personal food pet peeve, I was trying really hard to think about it. It's either unseasoned foods, folks who just kind of like sprinkle a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper, and that's the end of it. Or when someone, I love hot sauce, and someone giving me salsa instead of hot sauce, I'm like, wait a second, there's a difference. So those are kind of my food pet peeves. And I call on, oh my gosh, who has, Willie.
Probably my number one pet peeve has been and will always be going into an Italian restaurant and seeing Latino Mexicans or somebody from another culture in an Italian restaurant. And it's the same with when I go into a Mexican restaurant, I'm going for genuine Mexican food. So I go into restaurants or places, I want the people, the culture, the ambiance of the culture expressed. Period. That's a pet peeve of mine. And yeah, that's a pet peeve of mine.
And then Joe, I think
who?
Yeah, I think Joe is.
Okay, Joe.
Joe's.
Years,
okay,
so
Joe.
Not much of a pet peeve, but pre-peeled garlic would be my biggest pet peeve. I hate that stuff.
Wait, does it taste different from regular garlic?
The way they peel it, it's in a silicone tube. You know that one you use to peel garlic at home? It's just a big giant one, like a straw. So the garlic gets bruised and crushed, and they stick it in a plastic bag and in a refrigerator for 30 days, 2 months till you get it. So it's just sharp, nasty. You get convenience, but you lose all that beautiful, mellow garlic flavor that, I live 20 minutes from Gilroy, so I get gets kind of personal. Yeah. Pre-peeled garlic, hate it.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing your pet peeves. That was actually very interesting. It was very entertaining. To start off for the first question, to start off the discussion, how has food changed from when you were young? And this is open for anybody to answer. And again, please try to exchange ideas and build off of each other's answers.
I can start with this one. When I first started with vegetarian vegan food, it was tofu, tempeh, and seitan. And you pretty much had to make your own seitan and tempeh because it was never available. And now it's ridiculous. I can't believe the amount of offerings that there are for this type of stuff. And some of this stuff is actually better than its, animal protein counterpart, in my opinion. The Beyond sausages, for instance, are just, my brother was a butcher for 36 years, and his sausages are some of the best I've ever had. And those two Beyond offerings just knocked him right out of the park, because they're just really good. The ingredients they use are very high quality, the spices and seasonings, and then the way they craft them. It's just hard to tell it's not the real thing. And I think that's just true artwork, true craftsmanship, and that just wasn't available 30, 40 years ago at all.
Oh wait, were you gonna say something, Eddie?
I just sent it in the chat.
Oh. Are we not gonna worry about it?
Oh yeah. I think we could go through, to be honest, and everyone just give a really quick intro. Your name, your age, and how your relationship with food. So whether you're just like a casual cook or whether you're a chef and things like that. But yeah, thank you, Eddie, for reminding us. Really appreciate that. And location, please. Location in America. So I guess, and Nadia, if you could start, and then call upon someone else.
Yeah, hi everyone again. My name's Nadia. I am 18. I'm in Miami. I used to live in Los Angeles, but I moved here in December. So far loving it here, and I do love to cook. I started cooking mostly in high school, so yeah, that's why I'm here. Well, except for being the co-lead for Zoomers to Boomers. But yes, how about Brooke?
I'm Brooke. I'm trying to write down what you told me to say. I'm 40, and I love to cook. That's one of my favorite things to do, to cook for myself and cook for others. And what was the other thing? So sorry.
Where are you right now?
Yeah,
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. Eddie, go ahead. Go.
Did you say Eddie? I think so. So I'm Eddie. I am 44 years old. My pronouns are he, him. I, unlike Nadia, moved from Miami to Los Angeles recently, and I love them both, but I'm a chef. I grew up in South Texas, and my cuisine is largely Latin American plant-based foods. Is this where Omar, introduce or say how food has changed also?
No, it's okay. We'll just revisit the question after everyone's done their introductions.
All right. I'm sorry. Let's go with Willie.
Hi again, my name is Willie. Working out Central, Compton, Watts, East LA communities. In Oregon, matter of fact, I'm in Gresham, Oregon, Rockwood, as we speak. And I am 68 come June. And I'm not a chef. There's only one person in the world I allow to call me chef, even though I have a defunct culinary experience. It's only because of a product I make that fit his genre in Indonesia. But other than that, I'm not a chef. I respect chefs too much to call myself a chef. But glad to be here. I would call Joe. Let me pick on Joe today. Joe. I think Joe went already. Yeah, Joe went already.
I'm 62 years old. I worked as a chef for 38 years, mostly San Francisco Bay Area, native Californian. I'm not vegan, but completely fascinated with the cuisine, and I've worked with it extensively for many years. It started with Eric Tucker, who is a vegan chef at Millennium Restaurant in Oakland, but that started out as Millie's New Millennium on 4th Street in San Rafael. Then it went to San Francisco and Union Square, and then finally its new home in Oakland. So it's been 45 years of that restaurant, and we go way back. He's also not a vegan chef, but I think that's why he's so good and why he gets so much crossover. I'm located in Merced, California, but I'm from the Bay Area originally, just pretty much all over. You could just take a circle from Berkeley and go north to Orange County and down to San Jose, and that's it. I can't see who to call next, so.
It's okay, I could just help out here. Kimmy, if you could go next.
Hi, I'm Kimmy, pronoun she, her, and I'm in college in like San Diego County. I cook for myself. I'm vegan, so it's been like kind of a cool thing, kind of getting to learn more about cuisine and stuff like that, while also living in college and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it off to Aditi.
Okay, hi, I'm Aditi. I'm from Portland, Oregon. I'm 16 years old. I'm going to be a junior in high school this year. And wait, what was the last question again? Sorry, I got lost on my train of thought.
No, it's okay. Location?
Yeah, I'm from Portland, Oregon. And
and your relationship to food.
I'm obsessed with food, especially Indian food. And I live off of my mom's, incredible recipes and amazing food, as well as the sort of like mix of spices and everything, because my family is from all over India, and we've got a lot of different traditions regarding food, a lot of different recipes, so it's been kind of fun to try all of those out. I will call on Shivangi.
Hey y'all, I'm Shivangi. I'm also in Portland, Oregon, and I'm also a rising junior, so I'm 16 right now. My relationship to food is I primarily do a lot of baking. I think that's what I'm best at. And I'm also Indian, and I'm mainly Bengali, so that's like my favorite type of food. Oh, and I also use she, her pronouns. Michelle.
My name is Michelle Schweigman, and I'm 51 years old, and I also live in Portland, Oregon, and I was raised on the standard American diet. I loved meat and cheese, but I've been vegan for 20 years now, and I love food. I love cooking for people. I love cooking for myself. I love eating. I love reading about food, dreaming about food, writing about food, all of it. Yeah, it's good.
Thank you everyone for your introductions, and I guess now we could revisit the question of how did food change from when you were young. And Joe, if you just want to summarize everything you said before, and then we could continue from there.
Okay, the summary would it's changed so much as far as vegan offerings have gone. When I first started this 40 years ago, it was seitan, tofu, tempeh. You had to make the last two. Now there's, my son brought these vegan chicken drumsticks to my granddaughter's graduation, and they had a little wooden drumstick, like a skewer in it, which I called it a vegan bone. So, I mean, the stuff you can get nowadays is just amazing compared to what it was even 20 years ago.
Can we ask questions? Because I'm just curious, like working in food as you have done, Joe, and seeing the rise of the vegan convenience foods and the mock meats that are so realistic. what are your thoughts about how vegetables are being thought of now and sort of having this moment, right, where kale was kind of sexy 10 years ago and now it's cauliflower? And, what are your thoughts about that from someone who's seen this 40-year, acceptance of plant foods?
Well, it seems to go in waves. I mean, if you look at the Chipotle guy was around 10 years ago because everything was Chipotle, and then all of a sudden it was ciabatta. And then they went to, so it seems like what you see on television or hear in radio or see in print sort of reflects the current trends. Now, because of all these vegan offerings, I think vegetables are having this sort of resurgence. People are sort of, re-experiencing things that, maybe they hated as kids or were forced to eat and didn't do it. That's really what I've seen. Just attitudes have changed toward it greatly.
Does anyone have a response to that or would like to answer the question themselves?
I mean, I guess I could say like even I went vegan when I was in high school, so like my junior year, which was about 3 years ago, and I think like even since then I've seen like a lot of different options come onto the market and stuff like that. But I also think it's just changed a lot more because I feel like diet culture, even though it's been around since we were a kid, like it's become a lot more prominent because of social media. And I feel like there's a lot more like fad diets out there. There's a lot more ways for people to kind of have this control over their diet or like have this alleged control. And then, it just continues and they continue on to these different diets, hoping to like change their appearance somehow. So I guess in that way, it's become a lot more prominent because I see a lot more people doing it and a lot more people placing an emphasis on it. And it's become like a forefront, I think, for a lot of people's lives, which is really disappointing to see, I think.
For me, in like the limited time I've been eating, I think one thing that I've noticed from like what I can tell from past trends about cultural foods is that there's a lot more, space for acceptance now, especially because probably immigrants make up a lot more of the American population now than they did maybe a couple of decades back. But I think seeing like how much more accepting people are of cultural foods and how cultural foods are now like a trend that also go in and out. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, I mean, there are negative effects, but on the other hand, it shows that like eating cultural foods is now seen as trendy at times and trendy or not so trendy at other times. But seeing that is probably like the biggest change that I've witnessed personally. So yeah.
And I think that's a good now not necessarily analogy, but what you said there, being as young as you are, because that was my growing up was when, and I'm not picking on Taco Bell, but when we wanted authentic tacos, we went to Taco Bell. Okay. It was like, whoa, when I finally really had a chance to understand that Taco Bell was kind of a generic of the origins of the original taco, I really felt that I wanted, when I did want Indian food or whatever, again, I wanted the real deal so I could say, wow, that's how it tastes in that country or that nation or that food culture. Because having two Indians on the call, I have a person here because where we live in Rockwood, I have access to 88 cultures, ethnicities, and languages. And that was a reason why, in part, I stayed here, is because what that meant to me was I'm in food heaven, literally. With the culture diversity, it gave me an opportunity to have access. And I've been here almost 6-7 years, and I'm still learning new cultural foods and traditions. So I love difference in the diversity of our food opportunities. But it kind of fit into what you were saying there about how we America has readily accepted the diversity of cultural foods and ethnicities, and it's only growing. It's not slowing down.
I think Willie hit on something really important that I was thinking about was fast food and how fast food has changed since I was a kid. When I was a kid, we used to have McDonald's with styrofoam, right? And you would throw all the styrofoam away, and basically, who knows how much styrofoam McDonald's has produced in landfills. But not only just packaging, but the different types of choices you can get at fast food. And for a lot of people who are marginalized communities or live in like food deserts, this was the only source of food that you could get. So fast food happens to be, one of the main sources for a lot of these, like a lot of groups. And seeing that change over time has been, from just eating burgers to being able to have actual vegan or vegetarian options, or even options that are non-dairy. I've seen that in fast foods as well. So I think there's definitely been a change since I was a kid, the amount of types of fast food, but also in more healthier options as well.
Something I think is interesting that what you said, Brooke, made me think was that when I was a kid, fast food was a treat. And because it was, I wish I could remember how much it cost, but like, it wasn't as affordable. They didn't have the meal deals. It was like, we had a family of 5. And I remember my parents saying, we can't afford Kentucky Fried Chicken because it would be, $50 or $40 for all of us to get food. And this was in the 80s and the 70s. And I think that the prices of fast food have gone down, probably as subsidies for those kinds of commodity foods have gone up. And, and that's kind of like the opposite of what you were saying, that there are better options now. But I think it's more affordable for people to eat fast food than it maybe used to be. And I don't necessarily know if that, I don't think that's a great thing, but I don't, if that's the only option you have, like, that's the option you have. At least you can now get a Beyond Burger instead of a meat burger. So this is an interesting thing that I thought about, because now we think of it as cheap food in a way.
Yeah, no, these are all really interesting things, honestly. You guys are touching upon different aspects of food, like more vegan options, fast food, and even like ethnicity, how ethnic food is being accepted in America over time. And it sounds like America is not only like, is it changing in general, it's changing very rapidly, it seems, because even Shabangi, like, it's not like you're very old to even be noticing a lot of these evolution within food. So it's all really interesting. I guess, like, for the second question, I just wanted to ask, like, what food do you try to avoid these days and why? And like, if Addie and Nadia could answer first, and then the floor is open for everyone else to respond.
I almost chimed in on the last one, but I just feel like there's just where to start with where I was even thinking, but it kind of ties into what foods I try to avoid the most. I feel like the way that the food culture has shifted into trends, especially cultural trends, has, at least in my world now, I feel like there are 2 beginnings, like my childhood and the beginning of my vegan birth, which was almost 20 years ago. And those are 2 different starting points where I reference. Back when I ate meat, when I was a child, there was, as Willie mentioned, Taco Bell was like the first one to culturally appropriate Mexican food, right? And I've seen that in the current culture of vegan food, there is that same cultural appropriation happening now with a lot of people who were not from the Mexican background or have maybe even never tried traditional foods from central Mexico or southern Mexico are now implementing these plant-based Mexican restaurants as part of a larger chain. And I try to avoid those places because those are the ones that I don't want to support. They're largely funded by people who are of privilege and come from a place that has a completely different perspective than what actual Mexican food is. So I avoid those places because honestly, I can cook more traditional Mexican food than any of those chains because I learned from the person who said a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And that's my culture of food, and that's what I really believe in. And I want to support those businesses that actually are doing things the traditional way and ways that embrace foods from the earth, the way a lot of people from indigenous cultures in Mexico, Mayans, Aztecs, a lot of the other people who are indigenous from different tribes, and their techniques. And I want to keep those alive. I don't want to keep perpetuating this shift of plant-based chain restaurants run by rich white people.
I mean, honestly, I agree completely with what you said, Eddie. And I would have to basically repeat what you said, just in a little bit different way. That's literally my thoughts. But I have noticed it a lot with like the Russian cuisine and everything. I went to a restaurant the other day for my friend's birthday, and I didn't even know it was Russian because it didn't look Russian. I was like, that's weird. That's suspicious. And like, you know, they did try to implement a lot of vegan options, which was great. But then I did notice a lot of things that just didn't add up. And then turns out it wasn't really even the Russians that owned the place, that ran the place. And that was just really weird. So they did try to, you know, make it seem like it was owned by the local Russians, you know, make it like the local business and everything, but it wasn't. So I would have to say that I do try to avoid places like that, but you know, sometimes you just get stuck in there on accident. You're like, oh my Lord. But yes, definitely love to support the businesses and the people who are aware of these things and who are authentic and just, you know, share their passion for the food and for everything else.
I'd like to agree with everything Eddie and Nadia just said. As you know, an Indian person here in America, I've noticed a lot of sort of culture appropriation of the food. Like, you know, you'll sort of go to restaurants that aren't really owned by Indian people and you see them using different Indian foods and you're kind of like, well, I appreciate you, you know, appreciating my culture. But at the same time, there isn't that feeling of like, yeah, you know, this kind of tastes like home. It's there isn't that authenticity is what I would say. And I think somewhat of like a different topic from sort of cultural appropriation, but something I do like to avoid with my food, rather than the food itself, is the perspective I have towards my food. And I think someone was talking about this before, but in like sort of recent like culture, especially in like Gen Z, is the idea of normalizing eating disorders and normalizing just having a cup of coffee and, you know, a couple of crackers and you're done for the day. It's normalized. And I, throughout middle school, I had that, because that's when it really started building up. I had that sort of perspective in me, is eat as less as you can. Eat as less as you can. The less you eat, the better. And no one told me that, hey, you can't support your body that way. It's not going to work. And I found out the hard way that it didn't work. So, you know, I think that's something I try to avoid, is criticizing myself when I eat food. You know, not, you know, putting a lot of pressure on myself when I'm eating and enjoying the taste of the food and the actual, you know, sort of flavors and stuff, rather than focusing on how many calories have I eaten today, or, you know, is this going to make me gain 3 extra pounds? So that's sort of the perspective I try to avoid.
Can I jump in just to quickly address that? I feel like, thank you for saying that. I don't think I even mentioned my real pet peeve, and you reminded me what my pet peeve was. When I was living in Miami, Nadi, you know how this is in Miami. There's like this culture of like a beauty and like this standard that is not realistic, and probably shouldn't be for most of those people in those bodies, because there was a terrible culture of people who would snap photos of their food and it looked beautiful for Instagram, and then they would toss it out and eat like a few leaves of lettuce. And I was like, how do you do that? Like, what are you going to eat when you go home? And I think it's so problematic. And a lot of these people were people who promoted those diets that were calorie restrictive in dangerous ways. There was a very famous YouTuber who was a vegan YouTuber who put out a few diet plans, and virtually every single day had less than 1,000 calories for a grown adult person. And I thought, why does this person have a platform? This is so problematic. This is so dangerous for young people who were her audience. And I'm glad that you said that, Aditi, because it's so dangerous to promote those types of lifestyles and perpetuate that unrealistic way to live.
Bouncing off of what both Aditi and Eddie said, I think, yeah, exactly, Michelle. Veganism isn't a diet. It's not something, like, I guess another thing that I try to avoid is like substitution foods. Because for a long time, that was something that I think I used as kind of like this crutch, as like, oh, I'm just being healthier or whatever. But then I didn't, the connection of you're also kind of exploiting the culture of the food that you're trying to healthify. Like, you know, the people made the food in that way for a reason, because the resources that they had at the time were all that they had. And they were using it to make it so that people could enjoy it and not to punish themselves or not to make themselves smaller. It wasn't because of their appearance, it's because of how it made them feel. And so I think that's also something that people need to be more mindful of, just the way that the food that they eat makes them feel and the way that it satisfies them. And it's not so much outside perspective or what other people are telling them to eat or what not to eat.
As somebody who is recovering from an ED, from an eating disorder, I really sat with this question, because when you're learning about eating disorders, you learn about your relationship with food as well as diet culture. And I'm like, well, what foods do I avoid? Well, I don't really think like that anymore. I have a better relationship with food, so it's completely different. If I had to choose a food I'd avoid, it's just because of allergies or my personal dietary preference. So I'm really, and one thing that has changed, going back to that previous question from when I was younger, is this idea or this concept of diet culture that, 10 years, 20 years ago, folks weren't even talking about it, but now it's so prevalent in everyday discourse. I absolutely love it. And it's breaking down a lot of these conceptions that we've had around food and our own personal body image. So I think that's awesome.
It's funny because that question, my brain immediately went to diet-oriented responses as well, or health-oriented responses, which it's almost like our brains are hijacked or like we're brainwashed, because ultimately, as someone who's vegan, the food I avoid is what I don't actually consider food, which is an animal's body or, what comes out of an animal. So it's funny that our brains just immediately go toward that restrictive eating from the sense of like body image and calories in and calories out and all that kind of crap. Not like, I'm vegan, so I don't eat animals. Like, that should have been the first thing I thought of. And why wasn't it? That's crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, Eddie, are you going to say something?
No, I'm just going to say, Michelle reminded me of something that I think about all the time. I never think about even like, I never think, well, I don't eat animals, because it's just like so part of my life that I find myself even looking at billboards of whatever, like a burger somewhere, and I'm always savoring it, thinking of it as like a vegan burger when I'm just like, oh, I forget, I don't live in a vegan world. So that's probably not a vegan burger, but I look at everything like it's like this Gardein or like Impossible or Beyond, and I salivate thinking, I'm gonna go to so-and-so and get a Beyond, it's crazy. But yeah, I guess I could have thought of that too. Instead I thought of cultural appropriation, so sorry.
And Willie, did you want to say something?
There was a whole lot said with everybody. I had a chance to listen to the last session you guys did with Steph and the team there, and they went pretty subterranean in that conversation. And we're touching and beginning to go there with some of these conversations now. So I'm just listening and saying I appreciate what is being said. I appreciate the diversity of the audience. I appreciate pretty much, even though we have 4 Ogonians or 5 Ogonians on this particular conversation. I enjoy these conversations because everybody is free to express who they are. And that's, I love that. I do, because I'm a flexitarian. I have 40 years. Matter of fact, Joe, I got a couple of years on you, brother. I have a 40-year history in the meat industry. Okay. So I understand the animal protein side of it from experience, but now I've been spending the last 5+ years in the plant-based industry, and I've been privileged to go subterranean because of my relationships with people in Indonesia, with SEP, and things like that. So I've taken that dive on the other side, never knowing if I'm going to be 100% vegan person, but having these conversations are not the kind of conversations that I say, oh, I'll never get on another one of these again. Because the people are telling me if I eat another anything that's animal protein, they can't partake in our conversation or whatever. So I appreciate the diversity of the conversation, but yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying all of that. Honestly, like that's one thing we try to accomplish as Zoomers and Bloomers. Just like you really can't have like healthy discussions of ideas if you're not willing to listen to anybody from the other side. Like to think that you're the only right one, you're kind of shutting down conversations that could happen in the future. So I really appreciate you saying all that. But yeah, also moving on to the next question. What are your views, is touching upon what we talked about a little bit earlier, but what are your views on vegetarian and vegan options in restaurants? And if Shivangi and Jill could go first, and then the floor is open for everyone else to answer.
I think for me, I'm not vegan or like vegetarian myself, but it's nice to see those options because when like presented to me, I am probably more likely to take those options than their meat counterparts. But often I find myself on a menu where I'm like, it's not really giving too much, So I think one thing that I really like to see when like I'm doing my own research about like vegan or vegetarian options or like dishes in general is seeing the particular attitude that chefs have towards meat and how it's like a superior dish if it has meat. But then when it doesn't, it's like a lesser, like smaller plate, or it's like an appetizer, it's just a salad. It can't be like this main thing, right? So any chefs here, please like talk to me about this because I'm really intrigued by like, has that attitude changed? Like, do chefs like now professionally see these vegan and vegetarian options as like, at the same level as like a steak or something? Because well, don't even get me started on my opinions on like steak and the entire cultural significance of that. But I'll just leave it at that like seeing how the restaurant industry treats these options is, I find really interesting. But yeah.
Joe, would you like to respond to that?
Well, for me, let's just go to menu planning. Before you would, the vegetarian option was
Sorry, your audio is just a little bit muffled. Your audio is just a little bit muffled. I think you might be blocking the mic.
Okay, there we go. So menu planning. When I did this before, the vegetarian was just an option. Whatever it was, like a vegetarian plate, and it was usually a salad, and then whatever vegetables you had on hand. Now you actually strategically plan for several vegetarian options and a vegan item or two. You really can't argue from a business standpoint. She was just mentioning, how does that compare with like a steak? Well, a 16-ounce steak costs $8, $10, $12. I can serve the same amount of vegan food for 1/10 the cost, and guess what? You still get to charge almost the same amount of money. So it's almost not fair that these vegan items go for the same prices as the high dollar proteins, because they don't cost, and the labor to bring them to serving is not even the same. So as far as vegan, vegetarian options in restaurants, I love the way it just used to be a plate, and now it's a page, and you can even take all of the vegan items on the menu and compile them into like just amazing poo-poo platter or whatever. So it's very exciting for me as a chef in the industry, because if you're looking at it from a business standpoint, you can make some really serious money on this. And I don't know why a lot of chefs go, it's got to be, beef and bratwurst, or forget it. I think you can do just as well with the vegan or vegetarian options. Where you run into the trouble is where you have to buy Impossible burgers or Beyond sausages. Those things are not cost effective at all, but they're so good you put them on the menu anyway just because people want them. I sure do.
Yeah, would anyone like to respond to Shabangi or Joe, or answer the question?
I would kind of just tag team what Joe just said. Some of it that's true, Joe, because you're beginning to see in the restaurant industry, literally vegan restaurants or chains popping up all over the nation. They probably have some around the world, but they're beginning to come literally with franchises and chains of those. So it's beginning to trickle down into our society, kind of like Sept has said in the earlier podcasts or such Zoom meeting you guys did, that once it reached that critical mass, it's going to just take, and I could say it from experience, the meat industry has literally seen the shot across the bow. They have. Especially when you get the premier meat magazine. I don't have one right here at this moment. And it's called Meeting Place, Meeting Place, and they have an alternative plant-based protein segment of meat. Okay, 100-year industry finally decided, okay, competition is here. You have the cattle you have people in the meat industry investing in these alternative plant-based companies. They know the change is slowly taking place. It's just how do they make sure economically they feed on that, but two, how do the average consumer look up and, okay, well, I want beef today. I'll have 2 or 3 days of animal protein. They're looking at the reality of that particular. So what Joe said is definitely true. There's more money that could be made or will be made in the plant-based, because economically and the rate of return might be a little bit better in the long haul.
You can just look at Smithfield, who's been making pork products for 175 years. Their slogan is fueled by bacon. They now have 7 plant-based offerings. So, I mean, it's a real wake-up call to the industry. They're all paying attention because they see where the money went. And I think if you just look at it from a financial standpoint, they can do very well. And I'm really happy for this because it means there's a lot of diversity that you'll get. And vegans don't have to just settle for tofu and a salad anymore. You can really do really well. I've always said to my kids that you couldn't have picked a better time to go vegan. Really, you couldn't.
Yeah, and I think, Michelle, you wanted to go?
I think also kind of back to what Shivangi said about sort of like what a big piece of meat on the center of the plate signifies. And I think that that's what is interesting to me, that culturally, at least in America, that's still what a lot of people consider a meal, is as a big piece of flesh surrounded by a carbohydrate
potatoes
and grain.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, what does that, I don't know. In Europe, that's the way. I've never been to India. I've been to Mexico, and it's a very meat heavy culture too. But it's like, there's, I think the interesting question is like, how do we culturally make it so that the meat isn't the representation of being satisfied or being full or being, fed, because if we really want to feed people, we can feed them a lot more plants than we can animals. I think it's interesting because it's like, it's status, it's the patriarchy, it's all these things in a steak. And I would love to hear what y'all think about that and how we can change the restaurant industry from the inside out to do that, to reflect better values than that.
Gosh, I feel like that's such a big question.
Yeah.
It's hard to say like what could change that other than what's already happening with all these plant-based companies doing like big things. I feel like every single week there's a new big chain that's adding some sort of plant-based option. I think the last one that I read about that I was really surprised about was Long John Silver testing out plant-based fish and crab cakes. I think it's great. I think it's great that that's happening. I don't know that that's going to shift the food culture, just like it's been centuries since the Europeans colonized Latin America and changed the food culture there dramatically, largely because of Christianity that when it interrupted, it really disrupted what was going on food-wise, even dismantling the cultivation of some of the original superfoods in Mexico, like amaranth, that was considered a pagan food, so they banned cultivation of it. Now we're seeing a resurgence of all that food, but it was because the Christians came into this area where indigenous people were growing these superfoods, and then they just banned them. So can we just blame the Vatican?
Well, I always said meat's too easy to get. If you had to run it down and chase it and kill it like you did in the old days, you'd have a lot more vegetarians on our hands. My friend's Native American, she's got this joke, he says, the Native American word for vegetarian is bad hunter. So I think if it was harder to get, it would be a lot easier to convince people that you really don't need to eat that much meat, because you're just walking around gathering, plants are just sitting there ready for you to munch on, but the critter, you got to go chase it down, or you catch it from the river or whatever. So I think there was a lot more vegetarian eating and got the meat or whatever when it came about. And I think if we ate like that, we'd be a lot better off. But the fact that you could just go buy a 17-ounce porterhouse and have a potato with it for $20, that's why it's the way it is.
I think the other thing too is the term, and again going back to if you haven't watched the last section, I would recommend, especially if you're kind of an industry player and just information. They dove into some of the historical context, but also some of the relevant today reasons to either be vegan or vegetarian, and the different reasons to be or not to be. But I would say we need to remember to the Native Americans, they were vegan or vegetarians. They were living off the land primarily and whatever the land gave them to live off of, which were plant based. And then the other substance, as it relates to the animal protein of the buffalo, subsidized their culture or their meals with salmon. So some of it is the cattle industry was introduced primarily in America through maybe the settlers, but definitely it became 100-year to 75-year industry to where we're on the back end of that today. They talked about, and I say they, the last session talked about subsidization, from USDA and all of that. All of those play a key piece into what we see and what we are having, and I say we as a nation are fighting against to bring a healthier fare. Now burgers, I'm gonna tell you, you might be 25 years or 50 years before you do away with burgers. Okay, but that's what makes Beyond Burger and some of those other burgers appealing to the public. I don't care if you're a flexitarian or you're a vegan or vegetarian. It makes it appealing because it's a burger. But there's so many burger joints continuing to come online. They're not dying. they're still coming online. So some of it is, we're talking about a 50 to 100-year legacy of cattle and all of that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that information, Willie. Brooke, did you want to respond to anything that was said?
Yeah. As an actual Indigenous Native American person, I do have some things to say. It's a very interesting conversation because a lot of people like to talk about how Native Americans were and all that kind of stuff. But there's over 574 tribes in the United States, and federally recognized tribes, and even more that are not federally recognized. And each one of them has a different cultural perspective and a relationship to animals and the way that they have the way that they have eaten before colonization. And there's a huge movement amongst a lot of these, tribal nations of indigenous peoples to decolonize our diets. So getting to more of how traditionally we ate before those traditional substances were disrupted. And replaced by commodity foods and government types of foods that we were forced to eat, that have drastically changed us and our bodies and our relationships with food. But however, there is a relationship with animals, and depending on that culture, it's a very sacred relationship. And so you're going to be very hard pressed to kind of convince a lot of indigenous people, and there's a lot of indigenous vegans and vegetarians, what have you, but for more traditional folks and a lot of indigenous other people, to go strictly to veganism or vegetarianism. Just because I said that relationship is different. It's not necessarily like one that, there's a cow there, or there's a prairie dog, or there's salmon, or what have you, and I'm just going to kill it and eat it. There is more like, you were blessed by the Creator to come into our lives to provide us with subsistence, and we also work with you, or we also help your habitat. We also provide a symbiotic kind of relationship where you're also able to thrive. So it's not necessarily like we're just eating, and not having that relationship with animals or fish or what have you. It's completely different. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that just a little, because, you know, that just keeps getting thrown around whenever I hear about veganism and Native American stuff. So just had to say that.
Yeah, no, and thank you for clarifying, to be honest. Like, it's really nice, and I appreciate the way that you clarified without putting anyone down. That was really nice of you. Thank you for all that information. We'll definitely keep in mind, at least for myself, in any future discussion. But yeah, so I guess like we kind of like touched upon a lot of topics about what our views on vegetarian and vegan options are in restaurants. I think we diverged a little bit from the topic, but I think we discussed a lot, which is always a good thing in my opinion. But I guess moving on to the next question, what can younger generations do to help promote different eating habits? And if Aditi could answer first, and then the floor is open for everyone else to answer.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that my generation, specifically, you know, Gen Z, one of the youngest generations right now, can fix. And I think going back to like the first thing I talked about was normalizing eating disorders. And it's, I know I faced a lot of like, sort of like the not backlash, but like the effects of that. And sort of wanting to use food to attain that picture perfect body, you know, using food as a way to essentially like torture yourself, because it was torture for me, you know. I know friends who, and here's the thing is that in school people will talk about it. They'll talk about, you know, oh yeah, I only had, you know, a cup of coffee today and a rice cake. And it's normalized across social media platforms because they'll do like, you know, what I eat in a day. And you'll look through like celebrities and influencers and what they essentially eat in a day. And it's, you know, a couple of salad leaves for, you know, lunch, no breakfast, and maybe a couple of chicken nuggets for dinner. And you sit there thinking, hey, what did I eat today? And I ate all of this, this, and this. And it made me feel really good when I was eating. And I felt so happy sharing that food with my family, sharing that food with my friends. But was that too much? Am I going to not like how I look in the mirror the next day? Am I going to critique my body even more, or my eating habits even more? And that's where the downward trend starts to begin. And I think that's something that my generation really needs to look at. We need to address the fact that we aren't really enjoying food anymore. It's just who can use food to look the best. And I think that takes away from the entire experience of, you know, having food with your friends, actually enjoying the taste of the food. If you want to have another piece of cake, go have another piece of cake. It tastes good. There shouldn't be a limitation on how many slices of pizza you can eat, or, you know, you can't eat something good the next day because you already had junk food the day before. That shouldn't exist. You know, there shouldn't be that sort of like limitation around food, and especially with like vegan food, and as someone who is vegetarian, not vegan, but vegetarian, and, you know, regarding vegan food, becoming vegan to starve yourself. And I know that someone brought that up in the comments or while they were talking. I think it was Michelle, but I'm not quite sure. Sort of saying that being vegan, if I'm vegan, I'm going to use that as a way to, you know, not eat as much. And it's not like that. Veganism isn't a diet. I'm going to say it again. It's not a diet. It's a way of life. It's a way of appreciating food, in a different way. And I think that's something we really need to look at and address and fix, because it's just making it more difficult for people to enjoy food. So, yeah.
Just bouncing off of that, I guess. I think, yeah, exactly what you were saying. I think we just need to stop placing these limitations on ourselves, but also I think it goes like deeper than that. I think it goes down to even the way that we connect with our food in general. I mean, think about it. Like, we have food deserts, we have all of these different things like right at the tip of our fingers. Technology and the way that just industrialization has like allowed us to have things as soon as we want it, basically. And people have just forgotten that food isn't just putting it in your mouth and like making sure that you do it again the next day. it's so much more than that. Food has so much more of a connection for people. You know, people go to the ground and they take that out from the ground and they're able to make it into something that is served in front of you. And it's not like anybody's like, you know, we don't have these rituals. And I do want to say, Brooke, thank you so much for speaking on the last question, because it definitely made me reconsider like a lot of like the way that I eat even. Like now I know like going forward, I want to be more mindful in the way that I like kind of notice the food and acknowledge the food in front of me. Because regardless if it's vegan or not, there was effort and there were people that put effort into that food. And so it's only polite of us to at least acknowledge that that effort was put into that. And it shouldn't have to be about how our bodies are affected by it, because at the end of the day, like I said, someone else worked to get it for us. So, yeah.
I think something I'd like to touch on is like the cultural significance of like having food together. Like I think you'll see it in almost every culture, or I've seen it in a lot of cultures, is that like the communal act of eating together is just so, it's something that I really value about food, right? Because something I've thought about a lot is I think people are just eating alone more often. And not in like you could be surrounded by people and people would still be eating by themselves, because I don't think people realize that, you know, food is always best when shared with others, right? And maybe it isn't even physically, but just like the experience of eating good food together is, I think, something that needs to be valued more, right? My generation, we have our own issues with the type of food that we eat and the amount of food that we eat and when we eat and what to eat. But I think we're missing the sight of like there's so much to appreciate around food, right? I don't see anyone appreciating and genuinely thinking about the fact that we have enough privilege to, you know, eat something every day or every couple of hours, right? So that level of appreciation I'd love to see happen, because this is like on almost like related to almost all the questions, but we were talking about abundance in the last question. And I remember reading something really interesting about the fact that the reason why America doesn't have like a super specific food culture like India or Mexico or like so many other countries do is because that type of food culture comes from an amount of struggle, right? If you think about the level of spice in Indian food, a lot of that comes from an act of like preserving that food, right? We did not have refrigeration techniques when this type of food was being made, right? So we had to have a way to make it last. And then if you look at so many other things, it's just we used what we had. But in America, obviously they used what they had, but there's also just an astounding amount of abundance, right? So much farmland, so many animals at your disposal, right? And obviously that comes at like, that was post-colonization, right? America had its own food culture. Every single tribe, Native American tribe, probably had its own food culture because they were genuinely using what was available to them. For spiritual reasons or just for logistical reasons, they had to use what they had. When the colonizers came and, you know, ruined everything like they had to, I think that food culture was lost because we were just in abundance and no one really realized the value of food. So I think that's what I'd like to see my generation get back to, you know, just valuing the fact that we are in abundance in culture, in types of ingredients, and the amount of ingredients, and yep.
I think another thing, sort of different from that, but coming back to, you know, this newer generation and the variety of issues we have with food. Another one would be the judgmental perspective that a lot of people have. That I have seen that so much, especially in high school, you know, as a teenager, where, you know, someone will go, what did you eat today? And I'll, you know, list off, I had breakfast and I had lunch and I had, you know, a couple of snacks in there in between. They're like, oh, you know, I don't have anything to like, you know, 3 today. What is breakfast? What is lunch? And I'm like, wait a minute. Was eating breakfast and lunch wrong? Is that a wrong thing to do? You know, and I think part of it is it's just that judgmental aspect when you see someone eating, you know, something that isn't healthy, regardless of whether it's vegan or if it has meat. You go, you immediately go and you go, it doesn't look that good. Why are they eating that? Why are you, or directly go up to that person. I've had people come up to me saying, why are you eating that? Why are you eating that? That's so unhealthy. You probably already had like 3 pieces of cake. Why are you eating another one? It shouldn't be anyone else's business to critique what another person is eating. Maybe that person has a different relationship with their food, and you need to appreciate that. And no one in my generation has that appreciation for, that personal aspect of food. Because while food is something that, connects different cultures, it connects people, everyone should have their own sort of personal food bubble. Just a random word, I don't know what that is, but, personal food bubble where we have a different perspective on food. We appreciate different types of food, and we don't go and critique other people for what they're eating. Let them enjoy what they're eating. It's food. It's not some sort of, it's not, what you pump into a car. That is a necessity. Food, while it is a necessity, has a lot of variety and is a thing that should be appreciated for how beautiful it is, and not, as a means of just critiquing others and sustainability and stuff. Yeah.
I'd like to chime in. I think your generation actually is the answer to a lot of our problems. I want all of you to run for office in some capacity, because I feel like your generation has actually given my generation hope for what this world could be. And just hearing you all today and how eloquent you all speak and how knowledgeable you are about so many of the food history that I took years to study, it's really impressive, and I'm really, really hopeful for the future because of you all. So please run for office.
Thank you for that, Eddie. That was really sweet of you. But relating to what Aditi says, and also Aditi, I just want to say, like, thank you really for being vulnerable. Like, I'm learning a lot from your experiences and your opinions. I really appreciate them. But similar to what you're saying, for the final question, sorry, just 1 second. For the final question, what have we done right? And what can we do better? So I think a lot of times we're focusing a bit on the negative of it, but like, what has like American food culture done right, and what can we build upon and improve upon? And if Addie could answer first, then everyone else could follow.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of stuff that's been done right. Number one, not just talking about problems, but also offering up solutions. Most recently, I tried this new product that's coming into the United States, and I never thought that we'd ever get here to this place where a plant-based pea protein can turn into pork. I just feel like there's just so much that has been done right, because finally we're putting research into things that are important to us. I mean, I think all of us on this side of the country, on the West Coast, we're worried about water and how we're using our resources, and we are depleting our resources faster than what scientists thought was going to happen. Like, what we were thinking was going to happen in 20 years is already happening now. And I think that people have figured out that we've got a serious deadline that's shrinking every single year, and more people are stepping up and going out and making things happen. And I think that that's what I want to see happen, continue to happen in this capacity. I want to figure out how to make these Beyond Burgers and these Impossible Burgers and all these other plant-based fish and pork and all of that more sustainable, so that we can actually have a future on this side of the country. It's the best side, I think.
Would anyone like to respond to what Eddie said or answer the question? If you need me to repeat the question, what have we done right and what can we do better?
I think one of the things we've done right is making food available to people that wouldn't ordinarily be able to get it. There's still a lot of hunger in the United States. I mean, one of my friends runs around Oakland helping homeless, houseless people, food, clothing, shelter, whatever they need. And food is often, the most brought up subject. And I've baked zucchini muffins. We've brought them to people. So the availability of food to people that can't really get it, I think, is better. What we could do better, one of the things that's always bothered me is, why does a burger cost $1 and why does a salad cost $3.50? It shouldn't be that way. It should be the exact opposite. The burger should cost $3.50, and the salad could cost $1 if you're looking at it from a food cost standpoint. So what we've done right, I think, is make food available to more people. What we can do better is have it make some sense. The burger shouldn't cost $1. The salad shouldn't be $5. I could list it under another pet peeve, I guess.
I think Kimmy wanted to say something, and then Michelle, you could go next.
I guess kind of tying all of these together, just in terms of like diet culture, and also the idea of scarcity as well as convenience, and like the way that we feel like we need to have food right by us. I think this all ties into the central idea of capitalism, and kind of, again, the idea of one aspect of it being hustle culture, where we feel like we need to constantly be going, so we don't put in the effort to be mindful with our food. But also, capitalism also profits off of our insecurities, which is a reason why diet culture is so prevalent, because, of course, the diet industry has found an area where people will spend whatever amount of money that they have to achieve the body that they want. And then on top of that, food deserts are also as a result of income inequality and redlining and a whole bunch of other historical issues. And so I just think at the end of the day, in terms of what we want to improve, I mean, obviously, if you want to be like super, super specific, it would be policy change, as well as just overall, like a different way, a different foundation of government in the United States. But even throughout the world, there's different issues that arise from this as well, and they don't all fall under capitalism. So I think just trying to trace back to the idea of what policies need to change under every single one of those different types of governments is what will help us to create a better future.
I would piggyback on 2 or 3 things that I heard recently, and I would agree that I believe I was somewhat surprised of a few of the responses from the younger generation when they spoke of the spirit, or either the communal spirit of food. I would want to say, I think we are on the verge of introducing something that the past has seen thousands of years ago, and we've seen trickles of it the last 500 or so years. But metaphysically, there's always, sometimes, there's always energy behind everything we do. Everything. I don't care what it is. You can change it and it forms. There's energy behind it. And it's the same with our food. When you eat something that's made from love, it's passed down to you when you eat it. Because it came from grandma, it came from grandpa, it came from the community or whatever. It's passed down. And fast food has literally devastated the earth because it's not food that's filled with life and love.
Amen.
It's empty. And I think we're getting back to that. And hearing some of what I heard today, I was really intrigued with, okay, yeah, it's coming back because it always comes back. So love needs to be who produce our food. Now, if the people don't love, you know, but I think love, food needs to be made with the intention of love, not profit, not
Yes.
gain, not a rate of return.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think we need to center a lot of our actions back to like the original purpose of why we do it in the first place, because
Yes.
we love the people around us.
Yes.
So I definitely agree. We need to center community in our actions much more. I think Michelle, you want to say something, and then after that we could do some closing statements. Oh, it's okay. It's
No,
fine.
yeah, I just, everything that everybody was saying, innovation, slowing down, I think it's, yeah. No, thank you for letting me listen in on this. This is good.
No problem. So I guess we could just start with the closing statements and just wrap everything up. I'll start with my closing statements. I just really learned a lot, not even just about the evolution of American culture, but like the different subsects of American culture as well, and what makes up American culture, and like what even is considered it, and also like just everybody's individual perspective, whether it's about how much they ate or what kind of food they grew up eating, or like even where like different perspectives of viewing food, like like how much should a vegan option cost, and should the vegan option be seen as lesser than the meat option, and why do we center meat around the food? I think all of these were really great ideas, and again, thank you everyone for being so vulnerable and like just being able like to openly share your opinions. I think the discussion wouldn't have been this great if you guys weren't like that. And I'll call on to Nadia next, and if you guys could just call on to the next person, that would be great.
Yes, honestly, guys, thank you so much for everything you said today. It really inspired me, and I guess it just moved me one step closer to, viewing food and cooking and baking, obviously, as something more than just diet. Because I feel like we do have those tendencies, we can just completely run away from them. But it is important to kind of try to do everything that's in our power to change our way of thinking and perceiving it, even if it's mostly subconscious. But yes, thank you. Kimmy?
I really enjoyed having this conversation with everybody. I definitely, especially after what you said, Brooke, earlier, I think I just need to take a lot more time to kind of consider the way that I sit with my own food, the way that I prepare my own food, kind of just a lot of the different things that we talked about definitely had my mind going. So yeah, this is definitely not a conversation that I'm going to stop thinking about at the end of this day. So I really enjoyed having it with everybody.
And if you could call on someone else.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Brooke, if you want to go.
Yeah, I had such a great time just learning from everybody's perspectives. Wow, y'all are just so knowledgeable and just blew me away. And definitely helped me kind of just learn different perspectives about my own food and my own food choices. And I just got to say that I think it's really important that we continue having conversations like this, because it builds understanding and acceptance of other people. While I think it's awesome to think that we'll all have the same type of food lifestyle in 2020, whatever. I think it's also important to accept that people are different, and that, we just need to accept that, and then just love our neighbor and love ourselves. So yeah, so great conversations. Joe?
Thank you all for having me. It was sort of a last minute thing. I really enjoyed all the different perspectives that I got. There was some things I wasn't expecting and some things I was. I'll circle back to the food made with love comment. That's what's missing. It really is. There's one fast food restaurant that I go to, only that one, because I guess that cook likes what he's doing, because it's really good. All the other ones fall pretty flat. So I think if we all get back to loving the food and loving the cooking and loving each other, I think we'll all be a lot better off. Thanks again for having me. I'll go to Kevin, or Willie, sorry.
I would first and foremost say thank you, Raven, for again allowing us to come together, because you guys are definitely serious about what you're doing. And when I first met Claire, some maybe 2 years ago, she was introduced through SEP, and then saw the energy and what you guys were doing. It was really encouraging to and for me. And that's why I was kind of waiting for this opportunity to hear the generation that's representing where we're at today. And I just want to say thank you for what you guys are doing. Continue to evolve and move forward, and hopefully I can continue to be a part of what you guys are doing along with some of the other participants today as well.
And if you could just call on somebody else.
Michelle. Michelle, did you go already? Okay, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. When they asked what I wanted to get out of this, I was like, I don't know. I just want to have a conversation. I want to listen, and sometimes I'm a better talker. But this, I wrote down what I think Shivanji said: food is always best when eaten with others. And then we're talking about food, being made from love, and it's all just us wanting to connect with one another and feed ourselves, whether we're like feeding ourselves food to have energy to live, or just feeding our need to be in community and to be with people we love, and to share, just that simple act of sharing. So this was so many cool ideas and concerns that you all have brought up, and it helps me really look at things from a different perspective. So thank you very much. Thanks. Sorry, I did it. Everybody does it. Did you go, Aditi? Okay.
So first of all, I'd like to thank all of you. This is a really cool discussion. I haven't had many of these in the 16 years I've lived, so it was a cool experience to sort of understand where everyone comes from. I didn't think we could have like more than an hour-long conversation on food, but it's possible. So and I'd like to thank Shivangi personally. She was the one who sort of brought me into this, and it was like just a day ago. She was like, "Hey, come on, we need one more person for this, and it'd be really cool." I was really iffy about it. I was like, "What am I gonna say about food? I'm not a good cook or anything." She's like, "No, I promise you'll have fun. It'll be nice." And it was really fun. It was amazing, and just a huge thank you to all of you for letting me speak, for letting me share my opinions, and for letting me hear yours. And I really appreciate everything you guys all shared. So thank you. Oh, sorry. I forgot to. Eddie.
Yeah, I don't really know what else I can add to what everybody else has already said. I think it's really amazing to have been able to be a part of this discussion with so many amazing people. I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. I think that Omar, Aditi, Nadia, Kenny, Shivangi, please run for office, do something. You all are such incredibly intelligent people who are fit to change the world to be a better place. And lastly, I want to thank Claire for inviting me to be a part of this. I didn't know what to expect. I've done a lot of presentations and panel discussions with people of different ages, and this is by far the most balanced group that just seems like all in the same sort of wavelength. And it's amazing to see that, from Generation Z to, the Zoomers to the Boomers are all very much on the same line of thinking. And that is beyond words incredible. So thank you all. Shubhangi, did you go? All right, it's you.
Yeah, I just have like one last thing to say, and I think this is proof because of like that food is a great equalizer, right? At the end of the day, if we have to find something in common with another person, that person probably likes to eat something that we do too, right? I really honestly believe that so many things can be solved by just sharing a meal with each other, and everything is more relaxed around food. So, having all of us talk about food and be excited about food and be excited for the future of food, I really love seeing that. And I think y'all know that I was the one who like pitched this idea to Omar and Nadia, and I'm really happy that they went with it. But I'm also really happy to see this come to fruition. And this is better than anything I could have ever expected. So I'm really happy to see that, like really excited to have this discussion. So
Yeah, no, and I'm happy you did pitch the idea and we did go through with it. And thank you for your help. And thank you, Nadia, for your help. And especially thank you, Claire and Jesse. Jesse really helped with the setting up the Zoom and setting up the YouTube live stream. And Claire has just been wonderful with recruitment. So thank you both as well. And thank you, everyone, for participating in the conversation. And if everyone could do a favor and join the Facebook as well, because we will keep all of like previous participants updated in this Facebook group. And if you want to share with friends as well so that we could get more voices and more participants in the future, that would be great. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Thank you. Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you.
Nice meeting everyone too.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thanks for the amazing conversation, y'all.
Yeah.
Bye.
That was good.
Are we off, Jesse?
Jesse, you there?
No, we're still on.
We're still going. Hi, everybody. Oh, I'm on the YouTube. This is exciting. For anybody who's still watching, hi. I'm Claire. This is our first time doing this, so we're new to live streaming. Jesse Zamora, can you close us down? Okay, let's just go ahead and hop off of this call. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Omar. Thank you so much for everybody who participated today. And I will send you a news link. Okay? Bye.